My name is Sophia Miller, 28 years old, sitting in a hospital gown at Boston Medical Center. My hands won't stop trembling. My little sister Haley has been fighting kidney disease since she was 12, and today I'm finally giving her one of mine. The surgical team is prepping both rooms. Mom's been crying all morning. Dad's nowhere to be found. Then, seconds before they wheel me in, my grandfather Arthur bursts through the door with 2 police officers, waving a court order, shouting at the doctors to stop everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to find out how my family's darkest secret almost cost my sister her life. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, Haley and I were inseparable despite our 3-year age difference. Our mom Caroline worked long shifts as a pediatric nurse at Boston Medical Center, the same hospital where I'd later find myself prepped for surgery. Our father Daniel was an accountant, always buried in spreadsheets during tax season but never missing our weekend hiking trips in the summer. Grandpa Arthur, Dad's father, was a retired police detective who lived just 15 minutes away. He'd stop by unannounced, often bringing us popsicles and telling stories about his days on the force. "Always protect your sister," he'd tell me while Haley played in the yard. That's what family does. And I did protect her. In elementary school, when Melissa Jenkins called Haley's science project stupid, I confronted her during recess. In middle school, when Haley struggled with math, I stayed up late helping her prepare for tests. We shared everything: clothes, secrets, inside jokes that made our parents roll their eyes in confusion. But everything changed when Haley turned 12. She started getting tired easily, complaining about headaches and nausea. At first, Mom thought it was just growing pains or perhaps anxiety about starting middle school. But then came the swollen ankles, the persistent thirst, the foamy urine that sent Mom into full nurse mode. The diagnosis hit our family like a freight train: focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, a rare kidney disease that was causing Haley's kidneys to slowly lose function. I remember standing in the hospital corridor, watching through a window as doctors explained things to my parents. Mom's nursing background helped her understand immediately what this meant. Dad just kept shaking his head, like he could refuse the reality of it. "Your sister will be fine," he told me that night, his voice cracking. "The doctors have medicines for this sort of thing." He was partially right. For several years, medications kept Haley's condition stable. She took pills every morning and night, had regular blood tests, and followed a strict low-sodium diet that Mom enforced with military precision. Haley hated the diet most of all. "Just one pizza night," she'd beg. "My kidneys won't explode from one slice of pepperoni." Sometimes Mom would relent, but those moments became fewer as Haley's health indicators gradually worsened. The medical bills started piling up despite our insurance. Dad took on extra accounting clients. Mom picked up night shifts. Their bedroom door would close, but their arguments leaked through the walls, about money, about treatment options, about whose family had histories of kidney problems. I left for college at University of Massachusetts while Haley was starting high school. The guilt of leaving weighed on me constantly. While other freshmen were exploring campus and attending parties, I was video calling Haley every Wednesday and Sunday night, watching her fake enthusiasm about her school clubs and new friends. "How are you really feeling?" I'd always ask before hanging up. "Same as always," she'd say with a shrug. "Tired but trucking along." Coming home for Thanksgiving my sophomore year, I noticed the change immediately. Haley's face was puffy, her skin had a yellowish tint, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She slept 14 hours a day during my visit. Mom had switched to part-time at the hospital to care for her. Dad had developed a nervous tic, constantly checking his phone for messages from doctors or insurance companies. After graduation, I turned down a marketing job in New York to move back home. I found work at a local agency specializing in healthcare communications, lower salary than New York, but close to family. Close to Haley. I converted our basement into a small apartment, giving me some independence while allowing me to help with Haley's increasingly complex care. By then, Mom and Dad were sleeping in separate bedrooms. Dad claimed his snoring disturbed Mom's sleep before her shifts. Mom said she needed to be closer to Haley's room to hear if she needed help during the night. But the tension between them was palpable, stretching across the dinner table like an invisible barrier. Grandpa Arthur visited more frequently, often pulling Dad into private conversations on the back porch. They'd stop talking when I approached, switching to discussions about baseball or the weather. Once, I overheard Grandpa say, "You need to think about what's best for everyone, Danny. Some secrets aren't meant to be kept forever." I dismissed it as another of Grandpa's cryptic life lessons. How could I have known those words foreshadowed the explosion that would nearly cost my sister her life? Haley's 23rd birthday should have been a celebration. Instead, it marked the day her nephrologist, Dr. Lambert, delivered the news we'd been dreading for years: her kidney function had dropped below 15%. Dialysis would soon be necessary, but the best option was a transplant. The sooner we find a donor, the better her chances for a full recovery, Dr. Lambert explained in his office, surrounded by kidney anatomy posters and his collection of strange paperweights. Family members are usually the best candidates. Mom immediately volunteered, but her hypertension ruled her out. Dad underwent preliminary testing but wasn't a blood type match. I held my breath during my screening, praying I could be the one to save my sister. 2 weeks later, the transplant coordinator called. "Sophia, you're a compatible match for your sister. Not perfect, but quite good." Her voice was professional but warm. "Would you like to proceed with additional testing?" "Absolutely," I answered without hesitation. What else could I say? This was Haley, the girl who'd helped me apply makeup for my first date, who'd written me encouraging notes during finals week, who still texted me silly cat memes when I was having a bad day. The following months became a blur of blood draws, tissue typing, psychological evaluations, and education sessions about life with one kidney. I learned more medical terminology than I ever wanted to know. The transplant team was thorough, making sure I understood every risk, every potential complication. "This is a significant surgery," the transplant surgeon, Dr. Chen, explained. "Recovery takes weeks, and you'll need to make some lifestyle adjustments afterward." "I don't care," I told him. "Just tell me when we can schedule it." While I was all in, strange currents were moving beneath our family's surface. Dad became increasingly agitated as the surgery date approached. He'd call me at odd hours asking if I was really sure about the donation, suggesting I get third and fourth opinions. "Dad, I've been through every test imaginable," I assured him. "The doctors say I'm healthy enough to donate and still live a normal life." "There might be other options," he'd insist. "Dialysis has improved. Maybe we could get on waiting lists at multiple hospitals." Mom, meanwhile, practically moved into the hospital, picking up extra shifts and spending her breaks in Haley's room during her frequent admissions for infections and fluid balance issues. She'd come home with dark circles under her eyes, collapsing into bed without speaking to Dad. Grandpa Arthur's calls became more frequent too. He'd ask detailed questions about the surgery date, about which doctors were involved, about legal consent forms I'd signed. When I asked why he wanted to know, he'd deflect, saying he was just making sure everything was above board. One evening in early February, about 2 weeks before the scheduled surgery, I came home to find Dad and Grandpa in heated discussion at our kitchen table, papers spread between them. "She has a right to know," Grandpa insisted, his finger jabbing at some document. "Know what?" I asked, dropping my purse on the counter. Both men startled. Dad quickly gathered the papers, shoving them into a folder. "Just some insurance details," he mumbled. "Nothing for you to worry about." That night, I heard Dad on the phone in the garage, his voice rising and falling in distress. "I can't let it happen this way," he said to someone. "But if I tell them now?" The surgery was scheduled for February 15th. The night before, our house should have been a place of quiet preparation and family support. Instead, Dad didn't come home for dinner. Mom said he'd texted that he was working late, but her reddened eyes suggested more. After helping Haley pack her hospital bag, I went to find Mom. The bathroom door was locked, but I could hear her muffled sobs. I knocked gently. "Mom? Are you okay?" The water ran briefly before she opened the door, her face freshly washed but still puffy. "Just nervous about tomorrow," she said, attempting a smile. "My 2 girls in surgery at once." "Dad will be there too," I reminded her. Something flickered across her face. Fear? Anger? "Yes," she said flatly. "I'm sure he will." I went to bed with a strange sense of foreboding, something beyond the normal anxiety about major surgery. In the darkness of my childhood bedroom, I whispered a promise to Haley, though she couldn't hear me from her room across the hall. "No matter what happens tomorrow, I'm going to make sure you're okay." I had no idea how severely that promise would be tested in less than 12 hours. The alarm blared at 5 a.m., though I was already awake, staring at the ceiling. I'd slept maybe 2 hours total, my mind racing with surgical procedures and recovery timelines I'd memorized from pamphlets. I showered carefully with the special antibacterial soap the hospital had provided, trying not to think about how they would soon cut through my left side to remove a kidney. When I entered the kitchen, Mom was already there, making toast neither of us would eat. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee. "Where's Dad?" I asked, looking toward the driveway where his car should have been. "He'll meet us at the hospital," Mom said, not meeting my eyes. "He had some things to take care of first." The drive to Boston Medical Center was tense and mostly silent. Mom white-knuckled the steering wheel, jumping every time her phone buzzed with texts. I pretended not to notice her checking them at red lights, her face growing more strained each time. At the hospital, the transplant coordinator met us at the surgical admitting desk, her professional smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Both of you will be prepped in adjacent rooms," she explained, leading us down a corridor of beeping monitors and squeaking stretchers. "Dr. Chen will start with Sophia, removing the kidney, while Dr. Patel prepares Haley. Once the kidney is harvested, Dr. Patel will proceed with the transplant." Harvest. Like I was a field of corn. The clinical language made this all feel simultaneously more real and more surreal. In the pre-op room, nurses bustled around me, checking vitals, starting IVs, asking the same safety questions repeatedly. I changed into a hospital gown that gaped open in the back, surrendering the last of my dignity along with my clothes, which were folded into a plastic bag labeled with my name. A tech shaved a small patch on my lower back. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Winters, introduced himself, explaining how the general anesthesia would work. His calm demeanor and dad jokes about taking a good nap somehow made everything less frightening. Just before they were about to wheel me to the operating room, a nurse pulled back the curtain around my bed. Haley was there in her own wheelchair, also in a hospital gown, also hooked to and fore. Despite everything, her smile lit up the sterile room. "Look at us," she said with forced cheer. "Twinning in these designer gowns." I reached for her hand, suddenly overwhelmed. This was my baby sister, the girl I'd watched grow up, now hollowed by disease, her body betraying her at 24. "You're going to feel so much better after this," I promised. "Because of you," she whispered, tears welling. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just get better. That's all the thanks I need." A nurse gently interrupted. "It's time to move you both to your operating rooms." As they wheeled me away, I heard Haley call out, "Love you, sis. Love you more." I called back, our childhood farewell echoing against the hospital walls. In the hallway, I noticed a commotion near the surgical waiting area. A nurse leaned down to whisper to Dr. Winters, "There's some kind of family situation happening. Security's been called." My heart rate spiked, setting off the portable monitor attached to my gurney. "What's happening?" I asked, but the nurse just patted my hand and said everything was fine, just a mix-up with another patient's family. The operating room was colder than I expected, blindingly bright under multiple surgical lights. The team moved with practiced efficiency, transferring me to the operating table, attaching more monitors, arranging surgical instruments on nearby trays. Dr. Chen appeared above me, already in his surgical cap and mask. Ready to do something amazing today, Sophia? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Dr. Winters moved to my side with a syringe. I'm going to give you something to help you relax now. Count backward from 10 for me. 10, 9, 8. The ceiling began to blur as the medication entered my bloodstream. Then came the shouting. Loud voices in the hallway, getting closer. The operating room door burst open with a bang. Stop everything right now. The familiar voice cut through my medication haze. I forced my heavy eyelids open to see Grandpa Arthur standing in the doorway, his face flushed with urgency. Behind him stood 2 police officers, looking uncomfortable but official. In his hand, Grandpa waved what appeared to be a legal document. This procedure cannot legally proceed, he announced, pushing the paper toward Dr. Chen. I have a court order. The surgical team froze. Dr. Chen stared at the document, his eyes widening above his mask. From somewhere in the hallway, I heard Mom's voice escalate into a scream. How could you do this? She's dying. Then Haley's voice, confused and frightened, what's happening? Why are they stopping? The room began to spin as the medication took stronger hold. Dr. Winters looked between me and the court order, clearly unsure how to proceed. Please, I slurred, fighting to stay conscious. My sister needs this kidney. The last thing I remember before the darkness claimed me was Grandpa Arthur's face, a strange mixture of determination and regret as he said, I'm sorry, Sophia. You don't know what you're giving up. I woke disoriented, my mouth cotton dry, in a hospital recovery room. For a moment, I felt a phantom pain in my side, expecting to find surgical dressings. But when I gingerly touched my left flank, there was nothing, no incision, no bandages, just my hospital gown and an untouched body. The surgery hadn't happened. Panic surged through me as I tried to sit up, setting off a nearby monitor. A nurse quickly appeared, gently easing me back onto the pillows. Where's Haley? I croaked. Did they find another donor? The nurse's sympathetic expression told me everything. Your sister is in the next bed, honey. The surgery was postponed. Dr. Chen will explain everything soon. I turned my head to see Haley in the adjacent bed, pale and fragile, her eyes closed. The gentle rise and fall of her chest was the only reassurance that she was still with us. Still alive despite being denied the kidney that could save her. Through the large window to the hallway, I could see my parents engaged in what appeared to be a furious argument. Mom's hands gesticulated wildly while Dad's shoulders hunched defensively. 2 police officers stood nearby, speaking with hospital administrators. And there was Grandpa Arthur, sitting rigidly on a waiting room chair, his face set in stone. Dr. Chen entered our room, followed by a woman in a business suit who introduced herself as Marissa Lopez, the hospital's legal counsel. I'm very sorry about what happened, Dr. Chen began. We've been advised that we cannot proceed with the transplant until certain legal matters are resolved. What legal matters? I demanded, my voice stronger now. I signed every consent form. I'm an adult making my own decision. Ms. Lopez stepped forward. It's a bit more complicated than that, Ms. Miller. There are questions about familial relationship that affect consent and donation protocols. Before I could ask what that meant, Dad entered the room, looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. His eyes were bloodshot, his normally neat hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it continuously. I need to talk to my daughters, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Alone, please. The medical and legal staff exchanged glances but retreated from the room. Dad pulled a chair between our beds, sitting heavily, his head bowed. Dad, what's happening? I asked. Why did Grandpa bring police to stop the surgery? He took a deep, shuddering breath. When he finally looked up, there were tears in his eyes. I've kept something from both of you. Something I thought I'd never have to tell you. Haley's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on Dad. What is it? She asked weakly. Haley, he began, then stopped, his voice breaking. He tried again. Haley, I'm not your biological father. The words hung in the room like suspended particles, not quite landing, not making sense. What are you talking about? I asked. Of course you're her father. Dad shook his head, tears now flowing freely. 25 years ago, your mother and I were going through a rough patch. We separated briefly, just for a couple of months. During that time, she had a brief relationship with someone else. I looked at Haley, whose face had gone completely blank with shock. When your mom told me she was pregnant, Dad continued, we decided to reconcile. I agreed to raise the child as my own. We never told anyone except your grandpa Arthur, who found out by accident years later. So I'm not really a Miller? Haley whispered. You are in every way that matters, Dad insisted, reaching for her hand, which she withdrew. I've been your father in every real sense since the day you were born. But not biologically, I said, the implications suddenly crashing down on me. And that affects the transplant because the consent protocols for non-relative organ donation are different, came Mom's voice from the doorway. She stood there, arms crossed protectively over her chest, her nurse's badge still clipped to her scrubs. There are additional psychological evaluations, ethics committee reviews, different legal forms. She moved to Haley's bedside, opposite Dad. I never wanted you to find out this way. I never wanted you to find out at all. Who is my real father? Haley asked, her voice small but surprisingly steady. Mom closed her eyes briefly. His name was James Peterson. He was a resident at the hospital where I worked. He moved to Seattle before you were born. We haven't had any contact since. And Grandpa knew? I asked, pieces falling into place. That's why he got the court order? Dad nodded miserably. When I told him about the transplant, he was concerned about you giving up a kidney without knowing the full truth. He thought you had the right to know you weren't genetically related to Haley before making such a sacrifice. So he went to a judge behind everyone's back? Mom's voice rose in fury. Haley could die waiting for another donor or going through the approval process for Sophia as a non-relative. I panicked, Dad admitted. I've been trying to find the right time to tell you both for weeks, but I was afraid you'd see me differently, afraid it would change how you felt about each other. So instead, you let it come out like this? I gestured around the hospital room. With police and court orders and surgeons and masks? I never thought my father would go to such extremes, Dad said, shooting a resentful glance toward the waiting room where Grandpa Arthur still sat. He called me last night, said he'd filed for an emergency injunction. I spent all night with my lawyer trying to get it overturned, but we couldn't reach the judge in time. Haley had been silent, processing everything. Now she looked directly at Dad, her eyes brimming with hurt and confusion. Did you ever really think of me as your daughter? Or was I just some obligation you took on? Dad moved to her bedside, kneeling despite his bad knees. Haley Grace Miller, you have been my daughter from the moment I first held you in the hospital. Biology doesn't make a father, love does. And I have loved you every single day of your life. I watched my sister's face as she absorbed these words, as she reconciled 24 years of memories with this new revelation. I saw anger, betrayal, confusion, but beneath it all, I saw the desperate need of a sick young woman who just wanted to live. The door opened again, and Dr. Lambert, Haley's nephrologist, entered with an urgent expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Haley's latest labs are concerning. Her potassium level is dangerously high, and her creatinine continues to rise. We need to start dialysis immediately while we sort out the transplant situation. And just like that, family secrets became secondary to the immediate crisis of keeping Haley alive. The next 12 hours unfolded like a medical drama, except no one yelled cut, to end the tension. Haley was rushed to dialysis while I remained in the recovery room, still processing the bomb that had been dropped on our family. Dad paced the hallways, alternating between consulting with his lawyer on the phone and arguing with Grandpa Arthur in fierce whispers. Mom stayed by Haley's side during dialysis, her nurse's training allowing her access that the rest of us didn't have. By late afternoon, an emergency meeting had been called in the hospital's largest conference room. I'd insisted on attending, changing back into my street clothes and ignoring the discharge papers a nurse had brought. No one was separating me from this fight. Around the long table sat an overwhelming assembly: Dr. Chen and Dr. Patel from the transplant team, Dr. Lambert, Haley's nephrologist, Ms. Lopez from legal, Dr. Winters, the anesthesiologist, 2 members of the hospital ethics committee, a hospital social worker named Brenda, Mom and Dad at opposite ends, Grandpa Arthur, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, and me, still lightheaded from the remnants of pre-surgical medication. Dr. Lambert opened with a blunt assessment. Haley's condition is deteriorating rapidly. While dialysis is keeping her stable for now, it's not a long-term solution given the aggressive nature of her disease. Without a transplant within the next few weeks, her prognosis becomes very poor. Dr. Chen explained the legal complications. When non-relatives wish to donate organs, there are additional protocols designed to prevent coercion or commercial transactions. These typically take weeks to process. Weeks we don't have, Mom interjected, her voice tight with anger. My daughter could die while we're sorting out paperwork because of this ambush. She glared at Grandpa Arthur. The older man straightened in his chair. I was protecting my family, he insisted. Sophia has a right to know who she's donating to. There could be future medical implications we haven't considered. Oh, please, Mom scoffed. This has nothing to do with medical implications. You've never accepted Haley as a true Miller, have you? Always treating Sophia as your real granddaughter while Haley got the polite version of your affection. That's not true, Grandpa protested, but his eyes shifted away guiltily. It is true, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. You've always had a different tone with her, even when we were kids. Less warmth, fewer stories, fewer surprises. I noticed, even if Haley pretended not to. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. Perhaps we could focus on the immediate medical and legal concerns? Ms. Lopez nodded. The court order temporarily prohibits the procedure based on informed consent issues. We can file an emergency appeal, but Judge Harrington is notoriously thorough. He'll want to ensure all proper evaluations and paperwork are completed. And how long will that take? Dad asked. Best case? 3 to 5 days. Worst case? 2 weeks or more. The social worker, Brenda, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. There's also the matter of Sophia's consent now that she has this new information. Legally, she needs to be re-evaluated by our transplant psychiatrist. All eyes turned to me. Did I still want to donate my kidney to someone who wasn't technically my full sister? This changes nothing for me, I stated firmly. Sister is not a biological term to me. It's a relationship. Haley is my sister in every way that matters. Mom reached across the table to squeeze my hand, tears in her eyes. The debate continued, voices rising and falling as medical, legal, and ethical concerns were weighed against Haley's deteriorating condition. Dad's lawyer joined by phone, suggesting various legal maneuvers to expedite the process. The ethics committee members debated precedents and protocols. Throughout it all, Grandpa Arthur remained increasingly isolated, his certainty seeming to waver as he witnessed the consequences of his actions. When he attempted to speak, Dad cut him off sharply. You've done enough damage, Dad. This isn't about protecting anyone, it's about control. It always has been. After almost 2 hours, we were no closer to a resolution. The medical team needed to check on Haley, so we took a brief recess. I found myself alone in the hallway with Grandpa Arthur, an awkward silence stretching between us. I thought I was doing the right thing, he finally said, his voice lacking its usual authority. Did you? Or did you just want to punish Mom for something that happened 25 years ago? Something that was between her and Dad to resolve? He flinched as if I'd struck him. Your mother was never good enough for your father. I always knew that. And Haley was never good enough to be your granddaughter, I countered. Even though she's the one who sends you birthday cards that she makes by hand. Even though she's the one who calls you every Sunday, not me. Before he could respond, alarms began blaring from the direction of the dialysis unit. Medical staff rushed past us. I heard Dr. Lambert shout, "She's crashing. Get a crash cart." My heart seemed to stop. Haley. Everyone converged back at the dialysis unit, where the medical team worked frantically on my sister. Her blood pressure had plummeted, her body rejecting the stress of the extended dialysis. They stabilized her, but Dr. Lambert's face was grim as he addressed our reassembled group in the hallway. "We're out of time for debates," he said flatly. "Haley's system is shutting down. She needs that transplant immediately, or we're going to lose her." Something in me snapped. All the politeness, all the careful consideration of everyone's feelings and legal concerns evaporated in the face of my sister's mortality. I stepped into the center of the group, no longer caring who heard me or what they thought. "Listen to me, all of you," I began, my voice low but intense. "In that room is my sister. Not my half-sister, not my sort of sister, not my technically not genetically related sister. My sister. The person who held my hand at Mom's grandfather's funeral when I was too overwhelmed to cry. The person who edited every college essay I wrote. The person who knows exactly which ice cream to bring when I've had a bad breakup." I turned to face Grandpa Arthur directly. "DNA doesn't make a family. Love makes a family. Showing up makes a family. Being there through the hard times makes a family." "Young lady," Ms. Lopez began, "well, that's very moving." "I'm not finished," I interrupted. "I understand there are protocols and legal concerns. I understand everyone is trying to do their job. But Haley is dying. Right now. And I have a perfectly good kidney that can save her. So either find a way to make this happen, or I'll sign whatever waiver you need absolving all of you from responsibility, and Dr. Chen can operate while I consent at the top of my lungs." A silence fell over the group. Then Dad stepped forward, standing beside me. "My daughter is right. Both my daughters." He looked at me, then toward Haley's room, with equal love in his eyes. "I withdraw my objection to the procedure. Completely and permanently." "Daniel," Grandpa Arthur protested, but with less conviction. "No, Dad," my father said firmly. "This ends now. You've controlled our family long enough with your judgments and your rigid ideas of what makes someone worthy. Haley is my daughter. Biology be damned." Dr. Chen looked to Ms. Lopez. "If the father withdraws his objection, and there's a medical emergency." The lawyer nodded slowly. "We could file for an emergency exemption based on imminent threat to life. Judge Harrington has granted those before." She pulled out her phone. "I'll call him personally." For the first time since this nightmare began, hope flickered in the hallway of Boston Medical Center. Haley might still have a chance. And our broken family might just find a way forward through the truth, painful as it was. Ms. Lopez disappeared into an empty office, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in urgent legal terms to Judge Harrington's clerk. Minutes stretched like hours as we waited, the only sounds being the regular hospital noises and the occasional update from Haley's monitoring equipment. Mom sat by Haley's bedside, stroking her hair and whispering reassurances. Dad stood at the window, staring out at Boston's skyline as evening approached. I found myself in the hallway, unable to sit still, pacing with nervous energy. Grandpa Arthur approached hesitantly, his usual commanding presence diminished. "Sophia," he began, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. "I want you to know that I never meant to harm Haley." I stopped pacing but didn't respond. "When your father told me about the transplant," he continued, "all I could think about was you sacrificing something so precious without knowing the full truth. In my day, blood relation meant everything. It was how we defined family." "Your day is over, Grandpa," I said, not unkindly. "Family isn't about blood anymore, if it ever truly was. It's about who stands by you, who loves you unconditionally." He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. He glanced toward Haley's room. She really does call me every Sunday, doesn't she? I never realized I was the only one she called so faithfully. Because she always sensed she needed to earn your love, I told him. I never had to work for it. Something shifted in his expression, realization, regret, or perhaps both. Before he could respond, Ms. Lopez emerged from the office, her face carefully neutral as she approached our group. Judge Harrington has agreed to lift the injunction temporarily, she announced. Given the life-threatening circumstances and the withdrawal of the original objection, he's granting an emergency exception to allow the transplant to proceed. However, she added, looking directly at me, he requires a recorded statement from Sophia confirming that she understands the biological relationship and still consents to the donation. Relief washed over me so intensely that my knees nearly buckled. I'll record whatever he needs. Right now. Dr. Chen, who had been consulting with his team nearby, stepped forward. We can be ready to operate within the hour if you're still willing, Sophia. Absolutely, I confirmed without hesitation. The next 45 minutes passed in a blur of preparations. I recorded my statement for the judge, changed back into a hospital gown, and submitted to a rapid pre-surgical assessment. Dad came to my prep room just before they were ready to take me to the operating room. I'm so sorry about all of this, he said, his voice raw with emotion. I should have found the courage to tell you both years ago. Why didn't you? I asked, genuinely curious now that the crisis was being addressed. He sat heavily in the visitor's chair. At first, it was because I truly didn't think of Haley as anything but my daughter. The circumstances of her conception seemed irrelevant. Then, as you both grew older, the right moment never came. How do you tell a teenager that the family structure they've always known isn't quite what they thought? Mom kept the secret too, I pointed out. We both agreed it was for the best, Dad nodded. But secrets have a way of growing teeth over time. The longer we kept it, the more dangerous it became to reveal it. He took my hand gently. For what it's worth, watching you stand up to all those doctors and lawyers today, I've never been prouder to be your father. When they came to wheel me to surgery, Dad leaned down to kiss my forehead, just as he had when I was a little girl afraid of the dark. I'll be right here when you wake up. They allowed me a brief moment with Haley before the surgery. She was barely conscious, the dialysis and medications making her drowsy, but her eyes focused on me as I approached. Hey, kidney buddy, I said, trying to keep my voice light. You're still doing this? She whispered. Even knowing. Especially knowing, I told her firmly. Now we get to choose to be sisters, not just be born that way. That makes it even more special. A tear slipped down her pale cheek. I love you, sophomore. I love you more, I replied, our childhood farewell again echoing in a hospital room. This time when they wheeled me into the operating room, there were no interruptions. Dr. Chen and his team worked with focused efficiency. Dr. Winters administered the anesthesia, and as I counted backward from 10, I felt only peace and certainty. The surgery lasted just over 3 hours. My left kidney was removed laparoscopic, with several small incisions rather than one large one. According to the surgical notes I read later, my kidney began producing urine almost immediately after being connected to Haley's blood vessels, a very good sign. I woke in the recovery room with a dry mouth and an aching side, but an overwhelming sense of relief. Mom was there, looking exhausted but smiling. It worked, she told me, her voice thick with emotion. The kidney is functioning beautifully. Haley's labs are already improving. Over the next several days, I learned that recovery from kidney donation is no small thing. The pain was significant despite medication, and simple tasks like sitting up or walking to the bathroom became monumental achievements. But each day brought improvement, and more importantly, each day brought better news about Haley. By the 3rd day, we were both well enough to share a room. Haley's color had improved dramatically, the yellowish tint replaced by her natural warmth. The puffiness in her face had subsided, and for the first time in years, she wasn't constantly exhausted. How does it feel to have a piece of me inside you? I joked as we watched bad daytime television together. Weird but wonderful, she replied. The doctors say your kidney is an overachiever, working at full capacity already. That's because it knows it has an important job, I told her. Looking after my little sister. Dad spent every night at the hospital despite his chronic back pain, sleeping in the recliner between our beds. Mom worked her shifts and then came directly to our room, still in her scrubs. They weren't exactly reconciled, but the shared crisis had reminded them of what truly mattered. Grandpa Arthur didn't visit for the first week. When he finally appeared, he brought flowers for both of us, identical bouquets, I noticed, not his usual pattern of roses for me and carnations for Haley. I owe you both an apology, he said formally, standing at the foot of our beds. Especially you, Haley. I've done a lot of thinking this past week, about what family really means. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with emotional declarations. I'd like the chance to be a better grandfather to you, a real grandfather, if you'll let me. Haley studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. Sunday calls aren't enough anymore, Grandpa. I think we need ice cream dates too. Like you used to do with Sophia. A smile broke through his gruff exterior. I think that can be arranged. 2 weeks after the surgery, we were both discharged from the hospital. Haley's recovery would be longer and more complicated than mine, involving immunosuppressant medication she would take for the rest of her life to prevent rejection of my kidney. But for the first time in years, she had a future that didn't include dialysis or an early death. As for me, life with one kidney would require some adjustments, more careful monitoring of my health, avoiding contact sports, staying well hydrated, but was otherwise remarkably normal. A small price to pay for my sister's life. The physical recovery took months. For me, the laparoscopic incisions healed quickly, but the internal healing was slower. Fatigue was my constant companion for weeks, my body adjusting to functioning with a single kidney. For Haley, the recovery was more complex. The immunosuppressant medications caused side effects, tremors, nausea, increased susceptibility to infections. But compared to the kidney disease symptoms she'd endured for years, these challenges felt manageable. As our bodies healed, our family began its own recovery process. Dad found a family therapist who specialized in medical trauma and family secrets. Dr. Rivera didn't offer easy solutions or quick fixes, but she did provide a safe space where we could express the complicated emotions that had emerged from our ordeal. I feel like my entire identity was a lie, Haley admitted during one session, 3 months after the transplant. Sometimes I look in the mirror and wonder who I really am. You're the same person you've always been, Dad assured her. My daughter. But also someone else's daughter, she pointed out. This James Peterson person who doesn't even know I exist. Mom had been reluctant to discuss James in detail, but therapy gradually loosened her protective barriers. He was kind and brilliant, she shared during our 4th session. A pediatric resident with a passion for medical research. Our relationship was brief but intense, the kind that burns bright and fast during a difficult time. Have you ever tried to find him? I asked, curious about this man whose existence had nearly derailed Haley's transplant. Mom shook her head. He made it clear when he left for Seattle that he wanted a clean break. And once I reconciled with your father, it seemed best to leave the past in the past. With Dr. Rivera's guidance, Haley decided she wasn't ready to search for her biological father yet. Maybe someday, she said. But right now, I'm still processing what it means to be a Miller. Dad worked hard to rebuild trust with both of us. He brought Haley old baby photos, pointing out how he'd been there for every milestone, her first steps, first day of school, first piano recital. Biology didn't matter then, and it doesn't matter now, he told her. Love is what makes a parent. Grandpa Arthur's transformation was perhaps the most surprising. His rigid worldview had been shaken by the near tragedy his actions had caused. He began making regular visits to Haley's apartment, bringing home-cooked meals during her recovery and listening, really listening, to her hopes and dreams in a way he never had before. I was wrong about so many things, he confessed to me during a private lunch 6 months after the surgery. I was so focused on bloodlines and legacy that I missed the beautiful person Haley is. It's never too late to change, Grandpa, I told him, touched by his humility. No, but I wasted too many years. Years I can't get back. On the 1-year anniversary of the transplant, we gathered for a celebration at our favorite restaurant, the entire family plus Dr. Chen and Dr. Lambert, who had become something like extended family members through this journey. Haley's lab results had been consistently excellent, her body accepting my kidney as if it had always belonged there. After dinner, Haley clinked her water glass, alcohol was still restricted with her medications, and stood to address our small gathering. A year ago, I wasn't sure I'd be here today, she began, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. My body was failing, and my family was fracturing under the weight of secrets. But then my sister gave me more than just a kidney, she reminded all of us what family truly means. She looked around the table, making eye contact with each of us. It's not about DNA or blood types or genetic markers. It's about who shows up. Who stays. Who loves you through your worst moments. Mom wiped tears from her eyes. Dad squeezed Haley's hand. Grandpa Arthur nodded solemnly. So I want to thank all of you, Haley continued. My sister Sophia, who literally gave a piece of herself to keep me alive. My father, yes, my real father, she emphasized, looking at Dad, who has loved me unconditionally from day one. My mother, who made difficult choices but always with love at the center. And my grandfather, who proved that it's never too late to open your heart wider. The evening ended with tearful hugs and promises to never again let secrets come between us. As we left the restaurant, Haley linked her arm through mine, our steps in perfect sync. How does your kidney feel about its new home? She asked, patting her side gently. Very happy, I assured her. It sends its regards. She laughed, a full, joyous sound I hadn't heard in years. Good, because it stuck with me now. We're literally family on a cellular level. We always were, I told her. The surgery just made it official. In the months that followed, both Haley and I became advocates for living organ donation and family support during medical crises. We started a support group at Boston Medical Center for families navigating similar journeys. The stories we heard there reinforced what we'd learned through our own experience, that many families harbor secrets, that biology is just one thread in the complex tapestry of relationships, and that love truly is thicker than blood. Haley returned to college to complete her degree in social work, now planning to specialize in medical crisis counseling. I continued my marketing career but shifted to healthcare communications, using my personal experience to create more compassionate materials for patients and families. Our family continued to heal and grow closer. Mom and Dad never fully reconciled romantically, too much had happened over too many years. But they found a new respect for each other as co-parents. Grandpa Arthur became Haley's most devoted cheerleader, proudly telling anyone who would listen about his brilliant granddaughter who had overcome so much. As for me, living with one kidney became my new normal. The scar on my side faded to a thin silver line, a permanent reminder of the day I almost lost my sister, not to kidney disease, but to secrets and rigid thinking about what makes a family. Family isn't defined by matching DNA or shared last names. It's defined by the people who stand beside you in hospital rooms, who hold your hand through pain, who tell you the truth even when it hurts, and who love you not because they have to, but because they choose to every single day. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you saw your relationships? Or have you experienced the power of unconditional love that transcends biology? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, resilience, and the true meaning of love. Thank you for listening, and remember, in a world where you can choose so many things, choosing to be family is perhaps the most powerful choice of all.